Well, hello everyone. Welcome. Today's training session is strategic planning in an uncertain world, and I want to talk about this and how we take this whole concept of strategy and how we develop strategy and how we develop it in uncertain times and like we have right now. And we really want to tie it back. How do we execute? How we implement? So that's our focus today. I'm going to use the tools and frameworks we use here at Summit Scale Coaching to help frame the strategy discussion and how we answer some of the key questions to get to that. And hopefully I can help you squeeze a little more value out of 2022 before you hit 2023. So a couple of things that I just want to focus on. First, I'll give you some practical tools for developing strategy. We'll talk about what strategy is, what are the things we actually think about and make decisions around in terms of strategy. Then we want to take those tools and actually talk about the process. So a lot of what I do is help businesses through the process of thinking about strategy, deciding on strategy and turning that into actionable, implementable tasks and goals. What we're focusing on here is objectives and key results in the day-to-day activities. And then lastly, just give you a few sort of tips, tricks, and how to make the process faster and easier. Because we have a limited time today, I'm not going to go through my background here. However, if you're curious to learn more about me and what I do, check out that page on my website at www.summitscale.biz/about. Now, a lot of what I'm covering today and the framework we use for the strategy work we do in coaching is based on Mastering the Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up, books by Verne, Harnish. These are masterpieces on planning for business growth. Mastering the Rockefeller Habits is for smaller businesses up to say 5-10 million, and Scaling Up is for businesses going past 5-10 million plus revenue. So the biggest challenges that we find in terms of growth process, first of all, product and customer development. So how do I develop the right products? How do I innovate? How do I find customers? How do I track them? How do I acquire them? How do I get them to use my products and service? So differentiating in a competitive world has never been so relevant. Another is finding and keeping talent. How do I find the right people? Where do I find them? How do I recruit them? How do I onboard them? How do I retain them over time? There's never been more pertinent in this world when we find ourselves now with kind of record levels of employment. Managing people and performance. How do we set up that people are doing the right things, that they're doing them efficiently, that they are delivering them correctly, that we're focused in the right areas, that we're delivering the right results, that we're measuring them in the right way. So setting objectives and key results is an important part to play in this. And then finally, funding and managing cash. We have a phrase that a growing business consumes cash. We need to make sure not going to grow ourselves out of business. More growth companies end up dying from indigestion than starvation, meaning that we create situations where the cash demands for growth can outstrip our resources and that we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. So we want to make sure that we have appropriate funding, that we manage our cash flow as we go. So that's the general things we talk about and focus on as business coaches. Now, there's another important dimension to this business growth process. There are points in a company's growth where you're bigger, but not quite big enough to have the next level of talent and systems needed to scale up revenue. And these points are where the business growth can plateau and it needs to leap from the top of one peak to the next, or kind of falling into the abyss. And for many, the natural response is to throw more money at the problem in the form of aggressive marketing or seek a cash injection to reinvest in your business. But spending money on marketing or taking on added debt may lead you down the wrong path. You have to consider what's actually causing that plateau. And usually it's one of these following 9 reasons keeping a business from growing. So firstly, an outdated business plan. It takes years to build a business, and lots of things change and evolve in a year or two. So it needs constantly being reviewed. Imperfect pricing strategy. A better strategy than lowering prices is instead to add value to what you do. Blending in with the competition. You have to be doing something uniquely valuable. Find a service that your competitors don't provide. Settling for too comfortable, having lowered expectations of performance. Investing in a ton of expensive technology, functionality that you won't use every day. Looking for free or lower cost alternatives is essential here. And avoiding tough decisions. Don't expect accelerated growth if you're not willing to make the hard decisions or change direction. A flawed focus. Instead of focusing on a fewer bigger clients that take a lot of energy and resource, focusing on servicing a smaller steady client base can be the way forward. And dependence on what I call DIY everything, reluctant to outsource tasks or hire help. If you're distracted from selling more and growing your company, you'll obviously stay stuck. So how do you create or get between those 2 points successfully? A couple of key things. Firstly, we want to make sure we have a clear definition of the next stage, what it looks like. So if we're moving from 500,000 to 1 million, if we're moving from 1 million to 5 million in revenue, we want to know in terms of those numbers, what it represents in a nice stable structure inside the company in terms of people, in terms of management, in terms of roles, reporting, in terms of processes and systems. And if we don't have that clear vision, we basically don't know where we're going, and we don't know how far we've got to go and how quickly we need to get there. Secondly, we want to reduce the time in that unprofitable zone or that inefficient zone. So that's really about how do we accelerate the growth process. A lot of companies end up taking too long. If you spend too long in that unprofitable zone, you're going to eat up too much resource, particularly cash. Thirdly, we want to make sure we have sufficient war chest. We want to make sure that we have funds available to get through that. I call it like swimming the underwater cave. If I want to get through that, I want to make sure that I have enough oxygen. If I don't have enough oxygen to get through, I'm going to have to back up, or worse, I'm going to get stuck in the middle. And then finally, we have to look at all the alternative, the creative paths we might have. So are there other ways to get there? Is there a holding place where we can get to before we make the next big move? So this is what we're doing to get through this growth process. So we come to this question of strategy. And to the question of what is strategy, there's lots of definitions out there, but I like Michael Porter's definition. His is the simplest and most effective for me, and his strategy is about making choices. It's about making trade-offs. It's about deliberately choosing to be different. And the flip side to this, which is also really important, it's also about choosing what you're not going to be. So a lot of what we're dealing in strategy and strategic planning is figuring out not only what we are and where we're going and what we're going to do, but what we are not going to do. And so with limited resources, limited time, a company really needs to make those decisions to have an effective strategy and be able to execute on it well. So what is a strategic plan? Well, a strategic plan is an evolving written plan that sets forth the vision, mission, values of your company, the long and short-term goals, or long-range goals, and KPIs so that your teams move together as one. Notice that the focus here is on the team. Strategic planning is all about getting your team into alignment and moving together as a unit. Now, if you're a single business owner or just have a very small team, it's still important. You have to have that clarity in your own mind and that clarity across your team so that you can move together as one. One thing that I want to emphasize here is this whole idea of rhythm. So as Eisenhower, Churchill, and others have simply said, plans are worth, planning is indispensable. So in an emergency or in times of certainty like now, the first thing you do is you take all the plans off the shelf and throw them out the window. But if you haven't been planning, you can't do that work very intelligently. So you have to have been planning to be able to do that intelligently. So it's really the process that is important in strategy, not the end result. It's the discussion of how we get that's most important. And we have a couple of rhythms that we kind of bring in. We focus on annual strategic planning, particularly this time of year, just before the new year starts, where we're looking at our core framework, which is the big picture, purpose and vision, the 3-year targets and annual goals. And then on a quarterly basis, we're looking at what do we need to do? What have we learned that we need to update on our strategic plan? What are our priorities? What do we need to do to improve our focus in our quarterly actions and priorities? And then we are doing on a monthly basis is reviewing progress, course correcting if we need to, identifying any obstacles that need to be overcome. And these are really the core leadership team planning meetings and rhythms that have to be put in place annually, quarterly, and monthly. So if you're looking at how you're setting up next year, I would take your calendar out now and really think about when I'm setting these meetings up, and how do I make them a consistent repeating rhythm in our organization? Now, in his book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, Verne Harnish describes that formula for winning this way. He describes winning teams have the right people doing the right things right. Now, this is a graphical depiction of that framework behind the idea of having the right people doing the right things right, and illustrates the fundamental decisions, relationships, and functions of a business. And as you can see, there's a lot of detail. So I'm just going to start breaking that down a little bit, just because it's really important concept to understand about, in other words, doing the right things. And when you look at this slide, you see this this part of it, this left-hand side, it's all about the right people doing the right thing. So one of the main areas in business that you're going to concern yourself is developing a reputation for your business. That really gets to this whole idea of branding and brand equity. You're building a reputation for your business. You get a great reputation by having the right people doing the right thing. So if you have employees who have the right capabilities and competencies so they can meet customer needs, that's what generates shareholder value. So it's all about getting, keeping, growing all three of these relationships: employees, customers, and shareholders. That's what builds your reputation. And it, of course, ultimately influences your net worth by producing cash for the business. Having the right people in the relationships produces cash. Now, the next part of the framework is having the right people doing things right. And the right people doing things right is all about productivity. It's about the products that are being made or bought, then sold, and then it's about tracking the progress and keeping good records. So it's about having the right people doing things right, not just doing the right things, but also doing them right. So it's about what they do, also how they do it, and it's about doing things faster, better, cheaper. So it's not just about cash like it was in that previous slide, it's about profit. So having the right people doing the right things lets you make a profit. And the goal is faster, better, cheaper. So, and to achieve that, you're managing and improving the business activities or transactions. So you want the right people doing things right. Now, how do we achieve the right people doing the right things right? Well, we do that thing using a thing called the accountability pyramid. Now, the accountability pyramid is a process of getting the right people doing the right things right. It's based on a book, Built to Last, by Jim Collins and Jerry Porras. So if you start at the bottom of a pyramid, every company is built on core values. They may be defined or not, they may be articulated or not, but every business has a set of core values. And businesses that last the test of time do so because they have a set of core values that are bigger than the lifetime of even the person who founded the business. And if you take any of the great businesses and you study them, you'll find that they have core values that kind of last forever. Next on the pyramid is the purpose of the business. The purpose of the business generally lasts the lifetime of the management or whoever currently owns the business. And if you've ever observed a business before and after it's been sold, you may have seen the purpose of the business change. That has to be, that's true for both a small and medium-sized business all the way up to a huge business and conglomerate involved in mergers and acquisitions. When new management takes over, the purpose of the business often shifts. Now, if the business is successful and has any real value, it's probably going to keep its core values and the legacy of the founder living on that way. But the purpose can often does change. So the core values define the way we should behave, and the purpose is why we're doing this business. Now, once you get past all that, and you look at what we call targets, and this describes where you want the business to be in 3 to 5 years. Now, on an annual basis, you focus on goals. This is where you might ask, what do we need to achieve this year so that we can reach our targets a few years out? And once they're determined, then you say, okay, all right, what actions are we going to take this quarter? In other words, how are we going to get there? And on a weekly basis, we're asking ourselves, okay, when are we going to do these various things? What's our schedule? What are we going to accomplish this week? Then lastly, on a daily basis, it's about, right, who's accountable for getting these things done? So this is the accountability pyramid. And without it, it's really impossible to have the right people doing the right things right. And you need to have this accountability pyramid functioning in a business if you expect employees to be meeting customer needs and creating shareholder value by making or buying products and selling them for a profit. And when it's implemented, it makes the whole thing work. When it's in place, especially as the business grows, as a business grows, things can spin out of control very quickly. Without the accountability pyramid, time, effort, and energy are squandered, and it becomes less and less possible for a business to really accomplish things. So accomplishing this, implementing this accountability period, then therefore requires really good leadership. And that's the reason leadership in a growing company is about 99% alignment and 1% vision. Now, most new companies have no problem creating vision. Creating vision is what you do to attract great people. It's what you get to get them, and have lots of times it's what you do to keep them and grow them by continually putting a big vision in front of people. It challenges them to reach for something beyond what they're currently at. So the vision piece is really important. But the other side of it is what we call alignment. Alignment is just as important, if not more, as in a growing business. Without having people in alignment, you're never going to be able to do things faster, better, cheaper. If you don't bring your people into alignment with the accountability period, you won't achieve your vision. And because of that, I really love this quote by Alfred Lord Whitehead. The art of progress is to preserve order amid change and preserve change amid order. So the goal is we're changing or making progress in order to preserve order, and that's really what the strategic plan and the accountability pyramid allows us to do. Again, if you go back to this concept we just talked about, as a business grows, it becomes more and more important to focus on alignment in order to achieve the vision. So the one-page strategic plan is the tool, the instrument that we use to produce the alignment and ultimately get the right people doing the right things right. And you ever heard the phrase of getting everyone on the same page? This is why it's called, what this is about, getting everyone aligned on the same page. We have a more focused version for the smaller business. In a moment, I'm going to take you through exactly how you go about completing it. But first, let's just have a look at the different elements of a one-page strategic plan. So first, you have the SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We also talk about emerging trends here in this section, and you'll see that we'll go on to that, some room on the one-page strategic plan for that. There's a section where you identify your business's core values. Remember, the core values are the foundation of that accountability pyramid, and they're also referred to as beliefs. Then you have your purpose, which can be taken further and articulated into what's called a big BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, a big vision for your business. The next series of items are the targets, goals, and actions. Each of these sections, underneath them in the one-page strategic plan, you'll fill up with what we call thrusts and capabilities, initiatives, rocks, and accountability, respectively. And I'll go through a little bit more detail that in a minute. And then you have your KPIs. Once you figure out where you're going and how you get there, you've got to figure out how you're going to measure your efforts to move in the right direction. So key performance indicators need to be identified and put into the one-page strategic plan and then reviewed on a regular basis. Then you have your brand promise and elevator pitch. These are all about thinking about what your USP is, what is it you're going to, that gives you competitive advantage in the marketplace, what's your brand promise, your uniqueness, your elevator pitch. And then lastly, you have your annual and quarterly theme. Every company should be coming up with an annual theme, which really supports the annual goals, initiatives, and rocks that the company is deriving toward that year. So that's the elements of the one-page strategic plan. Let's have a look at that, what that looks like section by section on the one-page strategic plan. So at the very top, you've got that SWOT analysis where we always start. That's the first thing you do in strategic planning processes. Take time to step back from the business and survey the landscape. What are the strengths of the organization? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities to exceed the plan? And what are the threats to making the plan? And the other thing we like to put here, are there any trends that might not fit neatly into the SWOT that may be interesting? We feel that we should be tracking them. So that's the SWOT analysis. That's the first thing when you do developing the one-page strategic plan. Next thing you do is the very left-hand side of the page, you have a look at the core values and belief. In those first two columns, you have your core values and beliefs, the purpose statement. When you're developing your strategic plan, you're starting with that 30,000-foot view, the core values and purpose statement. And obviously, once you've developed that, they're there kind of forever or be tweaked. But I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail right now, but there are exercises available to help you identify your core values and purpose if you haven't already. Next, we identify what we call the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And you see at the bottom of that second column underneath the purpose actions. Now, without getting into a lot of detail, big, hairy, audacious goal is a big, massive, crazy, wild goal that a company aspires to. And so, for example, Nike at one point had a big, hairy, audacious goal of crushing Adidas. They worked at that for years and finally did it. And so you just got to figure out what the BHAG and write it there in that section. And then you're going to come to your 10 to 30 year actions. What is below the purpose there? You're asking over the next 10 to 30 years, what are the main things we need to really do to hit our vision, our BHAG? What are the specific actions we need to take? Then look at the next three columns. You can see these blank tables underneath targets, goals, and actions, and they usually corresponded to specific financial targets for the 3 to 5 years, 1 year in that quarter. I'm not, again, going to go a lot of detail, but what we're actually doing is setting financial targets, and we normally do that in a piece of work that sits alongside your strategic plan, and that's your revenue and profit budget, so that you can literally transfer the information from your revenue and profit budget into this section of your one-page strategic plan. Then in the third column, where it says sandbox market, if you've already done some good thinking about your market, your customers' demographics, psychographics, all that stuff, you'll be able to quickly fill in that sandbox and market section there in that third column. If you don't really have a good handle on that, you'll need to do some work around your unique selling proposition and the tactical marketing plan. You also see a couple of sections there at the bottom around brand promise and elevator pitch. Just like your revenue and profit budget that needs to be completed alongside this, if you haven't already, you also need to do work on your unique selling proposition and guarantee, if you haven't already done so, which really determines your unique differentiators. And what we're talking about is your strategic competitive advantage, how you differentiate yourself from the rest. And there are really 4 elements to that: your target market, which involves defining your ideal customer; your unique differentiators, which is what is it about the way you deliver that makes you different from the competition; your proven process, what is the proven way you provide your service or product to your customers; and then what do you guarantee? And that's your opportunity to pinpoint an industry-wide problem and solve it, and that you can guarantee to deliver your service or products without customers being affected by that industry-wide problem. Now, below the sandbox area, you've got these thrusts and capabilities. A lot of times businesses will decide on that they want to develop a new capability to hit their bigger, hairy, audacious goal. And that 3 to 5 year period, we've got capabilities we're trying to develop. So these are significant thrusts we're trying to undertake. It's all about where we're going over the next 5 years. What opportunities are we taking advantage of in the marketplace based on our capabilities we currently have? Do our actions support that? And then if you look next to that column, you've got the next one is initiatives. When we consider 1 year goals, we think specifically about initiatives. So to meet our 1 year goals, it's all about key initiatives we're undertaking this year. And then the next column is what we do this next quarter. What are the ROCs and the accountabilities? ROCs are quarterly priorities, 90-day priorities. Now, just quickly explain the concept of ROCs and accountabilities. ROCs are the 3 to 5 biggest priorities that need to be achieved over the next quarter. ROCs are your main priorities. The bottom line is that you need to work on those biggest priorities first. Everything else falls into place. Most organizations start out the year with a huge number of priorities and get very little done by the end of the year. So by coming up with ROCs every quarter, you create this 90-day world. And then the other thing we generally do there is assign accountability. Accountability is, is that piece at the top of the pyramid. So once you figure out, okay, the 5 ROCs, the only thing you've got to do is get the people to raise their hands or allocate accountability. Who's going to be responsible for delivering each of those priorities, those big ROCs? And we want to assign all those ROCs and accountabilities of different people in the teams. And that generally, when the team formation process happens, you start to develop a high-performing team. Next, you'll see that there's a couple of boxes where you put your key performance indicators as well as sections for, and that's just, like the revenue and profit budget. If you don't know what your KPIs are, you may need to do that as one of your top 5 big ROCs or priorities for that quarter, so that you figure out, okay, what are the KPIs? What are the things? If I only have an hour each week to look at my business and see if it's on track or not, what are the numbers that I need to say? Those are your KPIs. Then we have some boxes, right? You can start to think about what's the theme for the quarter, what's the theme of the year, in all of those actions. And then you just finally on this, just to notice that there's these elements of the one-page strategic plan color-coded: orange, yellow, green, blue, and pink. And that's to do because the most effective way to develop a one-page strategic plan, excuse me, is to ensure that everything you say is going to do for the next 20 to 30 years in a single column is supported by something over the next 3 to 5 years, and everything you say you're going to do over the next 3 to 5 years supported by an annual initiative, and everything you're going to do with this year is supported by something you're doing in this quarter. So you get that connection between the long, tall, and short range goals. Now that you may have some years where there are no annual goals connected to your 3 or 5 year goals, but that's okay. But ideally, there's a nice connection running through, and that's why there's this connection across those columns. Okay, so the other piece that I just like to focus on to make sure that we're stretching ourselves. Everyone has a comfort zone, and the key things that they do, they know they can reach, they can be comfortable doing them. And outside that, our panic zone is where we have no clue what to do. If you tell me to do something, I'm kind of frozen because I don't know what my next steps are going to be. We want to find this learning zone. It's outside our comfort zone, but it's not our panic zone. We find that individually, but we also want to find that organizationally, business. And when we set our objectives and key results, we should be pushing ourselves a little. And the indicator I like to use is about 80% confident in the goals that we set. So if the team tells me when we look at our quarterly plan, and I look at their key initiatives and I ask them, how confident are you in achieving this? And they say, yeah, we can get this done, no problem. Well, I'm going to be asking, probably they're not stretching themselves enough. And we want to have a little bit where, it's a bit scary. We might not get all this done. And that's okay, because I want to make sure there's no gas in the tank, at the end of this. I want to know that they're doing everything they possibly can. And if they're saying something 70% less, it's kind of frustrating. They're not performing. They might be spending too much time on strategy and planning and not getting enough time on delivery. But we're not spending enough time on delivering those objectives and the results. So that's why I like 80%, not too simple, but a not too complex level of confidence. So just to finish off, a few recommendations. I've talked about what strategy is. I want to talk about how you actually build your strategy, what you actually do. And so the first thing I say is bring the right people together. Make sure the right people are involved. You have some people might be part of your input team who are bringing together analysis or facts or figures and providing information and analysis. And they may not be the right people to be part of the strategy development team. Who we involve in that process is getting input into the strategic process and that sort of thing. They may be a different set of people. So that's the first thing. Then we want to make sure we do have common values, priorities, and scope. So we want to make sure we're clear on what values are, what priorities are, that sort of thing. But we also want to make sure we have diversity of experiences and points of view. There's always a challenge. I think sometimes people end up setting their team around people they like. I want to be with the people who think like me. In fact, you don't. You want to have a certain amount of diversity of opinion and experience and background, skill set, so that you have new ideas and perspectives. And you need enough commonality around the important things like the values and stuff, but you want to also have some diversity in thinking. It's too easy to kind of get groupthink going when everyone has the same experience and they all know each other really well, and that can be dangerous. Second thing is make sure you have the right environment. So I find that getting out of the day-to-day space, I want to get people away from their normal routines. I want to get them away from normal distractions. I want to get them into a new space. I want to get out of that normal environment. I want to get rid of the meeting table, the conference table. Tend to put teams in rooms that without those tables, we get into an open space and try to get everything onto a wall, like having people sitting around, changing up that environment. So I recommend you do that. We want to inject new ideas and experiences into the thinking. And sometimes, we'll go and do a visit at a location, do a visit a shop, visit a factory floor, whatever your business, and see how you can get some new information on the table and what you might not, get normally, and get thinking people about differently on strategy. So that's number 2, create the right environment. Third thing, as always, stay with reflecting on last year. Focus on this whole idea of the respective view of the past. What are our best source of insight about how we might do things differently in the future? So firstly, start with collecting data. What are the highs? What are the lows? How did we do against our objectives? What did we complete? What did we not? Why didn't we? And once you have that data, then start to develop insights, observations, and inferences What patterns do I see? What do I notice? What surprises me? What do I see that's missing? What questions do I have? And then the third step is start thinking about ideas. At that point, you're still divergent, you're still talking about possible actions, possible ideas, changes to the future. But that's, things I might want to do in the future based on my observations in the past. And then we get into that SWOT analysis, the fourth thing, the SWOT and trends analysis, to define the landscape. And SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. We particularly want to see the strengths and weaknesses. What are the trends that are emerging? How do we play to what's going on in the market? Strengths are really internally competitive capabilities. What do we have to allow us to compete? And then trends are those micro and macro trends that might impact the future. They might be as simple as what's going on in our market, in our geography, in our politics, around economics, what technology trends are happening, those things. That gives a landscape that we can start making some decisions around. Fifth thing is then we figure out really what are our 3-year targets. Once we've really figured out our long-term view, that vision, purpose, we need to set out the 3-year plan. Where do we want to be in 3 years? And then once we've done that, starting to say, okay, what are my critical numbers or KPIs that we need to measure to make sure that we're on track over this 3 to 5 years? And then based on those 3-year targets, what do we need to be focused on over the next year? What are our annual goals? And then we figure out what are our key moves quarter by quarter. What are we going to figure out quarter by quarter? What are the objectives we need to put in place? I think about each of these decisions around people, strategy, execution, and cash. What do I need to do in each quarter? I want to look at the targets and their dependencies and need to figure out the top 3 to 5 priorities or objectives that I need to focus on that quarter to hit my numbers. And that's all about making choices. I'm making the things that I'm choosing to do, the things I'm choosing to focus on to implement the strategy, and thereby also choosing things I'm not going to focus on. And then finally, we just determine your first quarter objectives. This is what we've done. We've done the long-term planning, set out our 3-year targets, cascade it down to our annual plan, and now we're working out quarter by quarter and saying, okay, what are the priority objectives for the first quarter? What are the 3 to 5 key results that I need to deliver? And I think about these in terms of people, process, and finance. In order to deliver the objective, what are the key results I need to have in terms of people, process, and finance? And then we just consider those, what are those things impact on the various parts of our business, so these things sync up and work together. So that's the kind of lays out this process for how I moved from the highest level of thinking down to our strategy implementation level. And then that gets us to how we execute on our 90-day plan process, which for me is about execution side rather than the strategy side. But this is how we develop the annual strategic plan. So if you're probably in 1 or 2 places at the moment, if you have a healthy, profitable business, you have a clear plan for the next year and beyond and good to go, that's brilliant, excited for you. If you don't have a clear plan for the future and you're getting some help with developing your strategic plan, sounds like something you'd like to explore, invite you to book a confidential 15-minute call with me at timewithshane.com. If it seems like a good fit, we'll book a free 60-minute strategic planning consultation to get you started in the development of your annual plan, setting your 3-year targets, your annual goals, and your quarterly priorities. So I encourage you, go to www.timewithshane.com and book yourself a confidential initial 15-minute initial call. Then we'll get yourself booked into that longer strategic planning consultation. So if that's it, I think we're done. Thanks for attending, and see you next time.